Hey, how's it going? My name is Felix and welcome back to Tiny Glade. Today, we're going to be building a fantasy university. Alright, to begin this build, I wanted to start off with a massive grand entrance hall. As you would expect from a university, this would be the first building you see and welcomes in all the students and whatnot. But something I as well wanted to keep in mind while building the overall university is just the type of world it would even be placed in. Does it have magic or not? Is this some sort of fantasy? And my thought for the build is that it is a world of fantasy and magic, but this specific university is not completely magic based, so not like a wizard school or something. More akin to something that has general schooling and teaches all the kind of classes, probably like mages. Well, there are mages, archers, and whatnot, lancers, swordsmanship, and then like the general history of the world. So like a university in a fantasy magical world, just not a magic school. And I think that keeping that in mind just really helps me imagine the type of buildings that are part of this build and structurally how they may exist. Another thing for me that I wanted to keep in mind for the overall planning of this build, that I wanted to try and keep most of the buildings interconnected. Think when you see old classic universities, either in the real world or in fantasy, the general layout for a lot of them is centered around a massive building, and you always want to try and keep the students in the faculty from having to leave the primary building or be outside, and it's just much easier for the people living in the world to navigate and get to their classes, get to where they need to go, and they never have to actually leave any of the buildings other than maybe if there's something very specific out on campus. So just my initial thoughts and what really inspired me in this build and what just gave me the ideas I wanted. Now this entrance hall, I absolutely wanted to spend just a lot of time on it, and this also gave me really good practice to mix in as many layers as I possibly could. I just wanted to make it look very unique and very intricate, as it is the focal point of the university, one of the first things that people would see. And there's definitely a feeling of this has to be some big, massive, amazing thing that has been here for like centuries at this point, and a lot of money probably invested by the people who live in this world. So you'll definitely see me trying to mix and match a lot of different styles of trimmings, actually picking different styles, having a rocky base, and then maybe using the more wooden framing for the top, and just giving me a whole bunch of different variations within the build itself, just to make it look a lot more interesting. And then just rather than having everything being very monotonous and just like the same palette essentially, and really trying to mix all that in. And yeah, it just felt like I did a lot of work on the front face of this building. I'm really happy with it. I just kept getting ideas, wanted to work on it and throw on so many different layers, and it was very fun to do. And maybe I went a little too crazy sometimes, but it was just every time I got some sort of new idea, I just wanted to throw it on. And we'll also not even talk about the back of the building because we'll get to it soon, but really haven't worked on it at all. Also, it won't always be the case like this. This is like the one rare instance where I actually work on a building and then also detail it to generally finish up what I'm trying to work on. Like at that point, you'll see a lot where I kind of just bounce around and may throw something down just to have the initial idea of what is going to be there, but then I move on. And this is a prime example of that. I knew what the back was probably going to, at least the layout of it, or what buildings were going to be attached to it. So I've got some more towers here, but detailing and actually getting it all nice looking, that's a future me problem, and we'll typically always get back to it. But it is definitely a lot of just throw down the initial idea, get something brainstorming, and then really hone in the details later on. As you will notice from here, this is where I start to add some of the extensions coming off from the grand entrance hall, and this is what I was talking about earlier, where a lot of the buildings will start to stem off from the entrance hall and then be connected in some sort of way, just to have that huge university building feel where you aren't really having to leave the primary building to get to everywhere else. And something I would like to mention or point out is a type of architecture I use for this build. And I want to say that it is Gothic, as they make use of a lot of trimming styles and definitely a lot of towers, which is very reminiscent of Gothic, where you have intricate inlays wherever there's open space on walls, and just wanted to mimic that a bit. And then there's just, a lot of stonework on this university, and for primarily many of the buildings. I eventually also wanted to make use of the triangular windows and really tried my best at creating huge stained glass windows for a lot more of the imposing buildings, which can be somewhat finicky because the largest window size you can really make, like legitimately, is up to 3 connected windows. So you have to somehow keep them divided enough where you can connect even more, but they don't really line up together, and then the details on them get kind of weird. So you have to make do, and I eventually figured out somewhat of a way to connect like up to 4 pieces. But yeah, just something tried to do, and I think for some of the builds that we'll see later on, I think it came out actually really well. So this is where I wanted to try and add something a bit more fantasy. I really just wanted an absolutely massive tower, to be honest, but it also serves as a divider and a connecting piece into what will later be the grand dining hall. And imagine this would be one of the major hubs where many people in this university would be walking through. Honestly, I have no idea what else could be on like the top of floors of the tower. Maybe like the university museum and research of magics, a trophy room, etc. And I think one of the things in my head that just makes it somewhat more fantasy is just all the turrets on the tower and the turrets on turrets, which just feels magical, I guess, like a big wizard's tower, essentially. Now I'm working on the very large grand dining hall, and obviously this had to be a massive building, as this would be the place everyone is coming to eat. And I definitely think I need to make some cool names for a lot of the halls on the university that would probably make this a lot more immersive, but we don't have those. I don't have any names for them right now. It'd be cool. Maybe we go back eventually, start naming some of these. But I definitely had images while making this of Harry Potter and just those scenes where they are in the huge dining hall and everyone getting together at the super long bench style tables, and then you have the absolutely impressive stained glass windows just all along the walls and just filled with light, and it feeling very majestic in there. And even though I've actually never read or watched Harry Potter, so I don't actually know if that is called like the dining hall or something, but I think you know what I'm talking about. And that was the idea for that. We are going to move on to the central courtyard of the university. And every time you have one of these major courtyards where everyone walks through, there's definitely some sort of major monument or something to be a focal point in the center. And I thought it'd be really cool to have some sort of tower. I wanted it to be a clock tower. There isn't clocks in the game. I somewhat made a clock. It's a little jank, but you'll end up seeing that. I think it does work. It does make it, you can tell it's a clock tower. And I think it also serves as a library, and the fact that this is a tower, maybe this was like an archives, and a lot of students would be coming here to study, and all the history of the university and whatnot would be stored here as well. And this is where I really wanted to make use of the kind of Gothic style architecture where there's just so much going on, so many towers, and all of the stained glass windows, just really ensuring the clock tower to be a very imposing and memorable structure for the center courtyard. As once again, I think it would be a unique point of interest for the university, and as all the students walk through, is just in the center, everyone sees it. Definitely not afraid to really go into this build and this clock tower and make sure it felt grand and nothing about it is plain. But I also think that this has been another really good learning experience where most of the detailing I'm doing now, it's a lot of trial and error and figuring out what works and what doesn't. But as I discover the various mechanics, it just makes it so much easier for the next time I build other things, and especially once I start another build, what I can and can't do, and it all starts to really become one big compendium of knowledge and building in this game. And now I know how to accomplish certain styles or certain techniques, and I'm very happy that like this one has been a huge experimenting type of build where I'm really going in and detailing as much as I can and just really figuring out what is possible for me to know. So then next time I go into builds, it'll just be a lot faster, and hopefully I'm not as much jumping around from build to build, and then I just complete them a lot sooner. Which, speaking of which, I have not completed the back of the clock tower, but this one is actually for good reason, because I needed to know how the rest of the courtyard flowed, and right now I am making some pathways that go around the courtyard, and I did want to make use of some covered walkways, and we're definitely using building pieces and then putting pathways essentially hidden underneath the path to create arches in them. I don't know if this was like the best method, and especially there are a lot of arches, and I really would have liked if I didn't have the arches in the middle. So I think if I used walls instead, I could have had much finer control over where I had the arches, but I think this was just much easier to do, and especially the fact that I get the roofs on top to cover the walkways, and just providing a nice pathway essentially for people to walk through the courtyard. But now that I had actually finished somewhat of the layout going in, I could work on the rest of the clock tower. And once again, the clock tower has that super gothic feel to it, and I've included these corner support structures with these towers, but honestly, if you took a step back to look at it, I feel this clock tower also looks a little bit evil. It really, I guess that is the style of Gothic, where it feels a lot evil sometimes. I don't know how to describe that, where, you know, it just some sort of villain maybe, or this clock tower, maybe not the most friendly looking thing in this university. It's probably because of all the towers and the pointy bits, but I don't know. I think it ended up coming out really nicely. Moving on from the clock tower, I now wanted to add the student dorms, and there's going to be 2 buildings back here where the dorms are. I don't think there's really too much going on with them. The very standard, typical, super rectangular dorms, as there would be a lot of rooms in there. Now, I'm making use of different layering here once again, and this time around, a lot of the more timber frameworking for this, and I think it's really cool that you essentially have a middle trim with the wooden railings, and I think it just provides a nice divider between the 2 sections. Now, I wanted to start working on the left side of the build because I haven't really touched the left side of the university at all up to this point, and I knew that I wanted this area to be primarily classrooms and actual educational stuff. So the first building I'm working on is another hall, but I think this one would be strictly dedicated to the classrooms, though it is more of a unique building and another point of interest, so it probably has like a specific kind of research going on or upper rank classrooms or something going on in it. And now that we are starting to get more of the left side built, I can add in more pathways, and right here just adding the other dorm, pretty much replicating what I've got going on the right side, and then just providing a covered walkway between the dorms. At this point, I still didn't know exactly how I wanted the left side to go, and that generally was one of the points where I just had some trouble, and you'll start seeing some things occasionally there, and then I delete it, and it took me some time to really brainstorm how I wanted the left side of the build to look. So we are just doing some more detailing and actually adding in a lot of windows and doors around, while I really wanted to sit and think about how that ended up going. Definitely wanted to try and make sure whenever I do put windows that I am aware of what floor they are on, and making sure that the windows aren't out of line or something. I end up having that problem occasionally because I like to use multiple layers whenever I'm making certain buildings, especially certain heights. I like to always have a base and then the second floor essentially, and it becomes a problem when you try and put a window between them. And it definitely does not line up correctly. So sometimes it is a struggle making sure all the floors of the building are correct and the windows line up to it. But finally started working on the rest of the back of the entrance hall, getting that detailed, adding some more trims and really detailing it, making it look all nice. But you will also see in the courtyard, I added a pond, and I think it adds some more color, some more nature into the courtyard. Lore-wise, I don't know why, I think it would just be funny. That's probably also a place where students may fall into, and maybe it's one of those things when you celebrate something good happening in the university, everyone jumps into the pond for a tradition or something. It's, one of those kind of things. But I finally figured out what I wanted the left side of the university to look like, and more or less, I just continued the buildings down, and this is essentially an alleyway of classrooms. And I wanted something that felt, I guess, a bit more claustrophobic and making just use of the space. So you have something that is tight and enclosed, and then it would be just a long strip of space for students to walk through, get to classes, and just providing a whole bunch of space for that. Working back now, once again, figuring out more ideas, I definitely started using a lot more of these archways with the walls, and then also putting windows in between them. And I think it's another way to provide some depth onto the walls of buildings and just make sure that they're not completely flat and there's nothing on them. Once again, back to the entrance hall. I really loved working on this building, but I did think it was missing some height to it. And honestly, because why not? Let's throw in a massive tower on top of it and really give it just another striking feature to help it stand out. And I made use of a whole bunch of different layers and sizes just to give the tower a lot more character. Which you will notice there's like a bottom layer, a middle layer, another square, and then like a circular on top. There's just a lot going on. So back to the left side where I had all those classrooms, I had some space in the corner, and something I thought was missing from this university was some sort of auditorium, or I don't want to say arena. I don't know why, just the word arena feels kind of negative to me. Maybe because I don't want to imagine, people getting hurt and stuff at this university. But I guess it is a magic-based one, so there's probably protections in place, right? So it could be like a learning arena or more of a practical classroom, essentially. And then I guess it could also serve as the auditorium and where all announcements and things would be made here. And I wanted some sort of circular dome-ish building that I guess you would imagine an arena to be. So a specific characteristic of this building I wanted to use had been creating arches in between the stone columns. Now, unfortunately, at the time of making them, I did not know that an easier way to select certain build pieces when they're layered in between each other is by selecting the corresponding build tool of that piece, which probably would have made trying to select the arch on the wall and resize it a lot easier when I had to do that, but fortunately just did not know at the time, and it made this a lot more tedious than it probably should have been. Another thing though that made it a bit hard was making sure that the pathways to create the arches was large enough so that they could create the arches on the wall, but not too large where then they would create doorways or arches on the circular build piece I used as the arena's base. And those are just some of the challenges in trying to get this arena to look right and making sure that the details in them were correct. But moving on from that, I'm creating a back area behind the arena and just wanted to make a gondola here. And I don't know why I colored it purple, honestly. I guess I was just trying to add in some more color into the university. It is very gray right now, and later on you'll see I recolored some buildings because it was very gray and the university was pretty drab. So I think with the arena and the gondola, it was me wanting to try and add in some actual color to the build. And to finish up the back area, I included some towers and then a bridge between them, which I think just makes a cool overhang and divider for the back area. But now that a majority of the exterior buildings I think are done, it was mainly, once again, going in nitty gritty detail work, and occasionally trying to figure out different window patterns to really explore how I can make these buildings just look unique and interesting. But it is definitely a lot of just, surface there, need some windows. And I really wanted to try and keep these even, as I'd imagine that these are all just classrooms, like just massive amounts of classrooms. And this is another thing I was talking about earlier, just finding some different patterns I can use and really exploring how I can make the windows bigger. And then the clock, the kind of clock. I think you could tell it's a clock tower. Like it describes what it's meant to be. I think it fits the bill, and it's a clock tower. This is also the point where I am messing around with some color because I noticed how incredibly gray the university was. Unfortunately, I like the fact that it is all stone, and it was why everything was made the way it was, or at least the colors originally. But unfortunately, just very, very gray. Even though I prefer the fact that a majority of it, I think, would be stone, at least stylistically. But I guess gotta work with what we can, and I really needed some sort of color in the build at this point. And once again, just working on some more detailing. I think I started to also try and figure out other ways I can add depth onto these walls because they are very flat. And so you can use walls as separators for that. I think that works out really nice. And then I added a bell onto one of the towers behind on the back of the entrance hall, and I think that came out looking cool. It's once again, we're at the point where I'm just trying and experimenting ideas, and you do have to suspend your disbelief a little bit and imagine it as what it is. Just like what I'm starting to build here, I had this platform out here, and I thought it'd be really cool to have some sort of monument dedicated to the university, some sort of figure of some sort, and thinking that maybe this is the founder of the university, maybe some sort of hero, like a big adventurer or a king or something. And it would be a statue of the hero kneeling down with a sword into the stone. And I'm very proud of it. It's maybe a little blocky and funny looking, but I think it came out a lot better in reality. Trying to mess with it and just experimenting. I've also used the style of the wood, and I think it made a pauldron. So honestly, very funny looking to me. All right, so here we are at the final version of the university, and we'll just take a look at some of the finer details that weren't necessarily caught on the speed build. And well, I think it is funny. I do want to take a look once again at the super blocky statue. I don't know, if I didn't tell you, do you think you would have known that this was a statue? I think it came out pretty cool. I think I enjoy it. And it is a statue of a person kneeling down with a sword and stone, and I think you can tell. And sometimes you just gotta use your imagination a little bit for some of the features like that. But I think that's how you give the build a little bit more life as well, is just thinking about the things that I guess aren't necessarily builds, or sometimes you have to use your imagination for, like the bell tower. Once again, when you look at it close up, it may not exactly be the most legit thing, but it is one of those, when you view it from the build entirely, I think you can perfectly tell that that's a bell. And then the somewhat jank clock tower, but I think it works out, and it at least gives it just a bit more detail of what it could be. And then just looking at some of the more finer details I end up doing later on, once again talking about those window formations and trying to figure out how to make better designs with the windows. And here as well, just finding out ways how I can cover a surface with some sort of massive window. And it would be nice, I think, eventually if you can just resize them maybe, or make them super long like this, because then you can also see on the front of the dining hall here, we have what is essentially like a massive window, but you do have to connect the smaller versions up and try your best to make it look right. And this is what I mean, where sometimes the decorations may not be correct, especially if you get like clotheslines and stuff on them and they don't exactly make sense for such a large window like this. I don't even think the box should be there, because this is supposed to be like one single piece essentially, right? But taking a small stroll around, and then once again just seeing where I have changed some colors, try to add in some styles so that it's not perfectly gray. And then I really love the banners, and I think the banners really help to sell that university vibe that we have going on here, and that school spirit essentially. Now I will take a look into the first person here. I think we're right on this corner, right on this pond. Take a look, and seriously, the thing I love about the first person cam so much is you really start to get the sense of scale of the build. And I think it came out really well, and it does feel like I'm in a massive university. And we'll also take a walk into one of my favorite parts to go through in the first person is my alleyway here. The banners going across, and it's just that super tight alleyway, claustrophobic feeling. I think you can imagine all the students walking through here and bustling about, getting to class. Then you can have the arena or the auditorium, whatever you fancy, and then back to the dorms, and then the rest of the university. I think this is such a cool feeling, seeing all this. And then here, as once again, one of my absolute favorite features of the game is the fact that you can go through the day and night cycle, and I just love seeing the build go through the day and night, seeing everything light up, back to morning, and then back to night. And this time you can see how it's all lit up. We've got all of our pathways and lanterns spread about, and just how it is when the university goes to nighttime and everything is somber. But one of the also really cool features I think that was added pretty recently in Tiny Glade, and it's so cool, is the fact that you can actually now take your build and just swap whatever theme it is in, and it will just take your build and move it to a new theme. So it's so cool, and it really is like watching your build grow through the seasons in a year, and it's alive. It feels like there's a lot going on to it, and it's like, okay, we're in winter now, and here's the university during the cold months, and then we can once again swap it, maybe go to flowery, so now it's spring, and it's like the start of a new school year. Everyone's coming in. It's so cool that it just seamlessly does that so well, and everything just works. So this is amazing. And then we'll go back to the autumn, the standard university start feeling, and I don't know, maybe there's some sort of magical fantasy sports going on somewhere on here, I don't know, in this like courtyard. But yeah, this was fun, and I enjoyed this one a lot. Now, if you did enjoy this video, I hope you consider dropping a like. Definitely helps me out, and then subscribing and catching whatever I end up building next, because I definitely feel like I'm going to be continuing in Tiny Glade, probably working on another build, because there's something on my mind right now. But anyways, my name is Felix, and I hope to catch you again next time. Bye!